Hey, got a good one for you. I'm going to talk about those gypsies. Also, serpents, snakes. And the Statue of Liberty is actually a black woman. We're actually told that America was named after the explorer Amerigo Vespucci, right? But the name more likely comes from the Incan two-headed serpent god named Amaru, Amaru. So likely it comes from the Incan two-headed serpent god named Amaru. That means plumed serpent or feathered serpent. And remember, the Vatican also means serpent. So I'll be getting more into that in a bit. But here is the catcher. Amaruca is literally translated land of the plumed serpents. Welcome to America. Yes, the snake rises again. So let's get going here and uncover all this stuff. And also more about why the pilgrims and those hats tie in together here today. So, anyways, there was a turn that the Sassoons, the lovely people that spread Orthodox Jews all around the world, their great income went into the downslide. Evidently, the kids didn't want to keep working like Dad the David did. But the funny thing is that nowhere in British or Jewish history are the truths of this wantonly immoral family and the evil inspired colonization they were part of. Instead, the Jewish books and encyclopedias all praise the Sassoons for their great contribution to Indian society, without a mention of the God-forsaken criminality of these people. A family myth held that the Sassoons descended from King David, after whom David Sassoon, treasurer for the Pasha of Ottoman Baghdad, who was expelled from Iraq in 1834, was named. So, these Ashkenazi Jews are actually quite the aggressive ones, aren't they? Because, there's proof that they did not come from Israel. But as the story goes, they claim that the Sassoons descended from King David, and that was where David Sassoon got his name. Well, let's take a look here and see. This talks to the nature of these people. There's one sister, Farah Sassoon, and she was pretty much, if you read their history, Farah Sassoon was obviously a woman, but she was pretty much neglected in the whole deal, but a true martyr in the Jewish sense of things. Leave me alone here. It's okay in the dark. The light might hurt my eyes too much. It's okay. Don't worry about me. So there is this story, and there's also this person called Rabbi Sassoon who happens to live in Israel, same place as Farah Sassoon. Rabbi Sassoon recently learned that a street in Jerusalem will be named for Farah Sassoon, a significant moment for the family. Despite not always being treated with respect, Farah sets an example of humility and consideration that embodies her greatness. According to a story passed down in the family, Farah once helped a family member who had given her trouble, saying, "It is our custom to suffer and to be silent." This act of kindness demonstrates her virtue, regardless of religious or personal differences. These qualities are what the family aims to preserve and pass down through the generations, reflecting the legacy that was left for them to uphold. As a descendant of this family, I consider it both a privilege and a duty to carry on our traditions from previous generations. It is important to utilize the tools that have been passed down to us to create a positive impact for the future. At our institute, we strive to assist the people of Israel while our family remains engaged in public service by supporting various organizations and individuals, they say. Well, kind of funny that the Sassoons are still in Israel bragging about what virtuous people they are. I guess they're probably also spending time making sure no mention of them gets put in any of the actual history books, right? The decline of the Sassoons compared to, say, the Rothschilds lay in the foundational enterprise of opium trading. Banking, the Rothschilds' legacy, remains an integral part of the modern everyday, where opium no longer retains the romantic aura it harbored throughout the 1800s. As French banker Edmond James de Rothschild supposedly confided to a visitor before a collection of splendid objects d'art during a private tour, Joseph said to the person, "Ah, the 19th century, that's when you could really make money." Is money really the root of all evil? It's really a well-known saying, right? It suggests that the love of money or an excessive focus on wealth can lead to negative outcomes, such as greed, selfishness, and unethical behavior. The actual quote comes from their Bible, and it says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." It's not the money, it's the love of the money, the worship of the money, calling yourself gods, right? I had an interesting thought. I was thinking about, to get into their club. Because recently I talked about on YouTube, there were a few shows those shows were specifically hand selected. That was not done by a bot, okay? And the one show that was removed that I had mentioned before is a show about them getting those black eyes. For some reason, they felt compelled to remove that show also, right? Maybe a little bit embarrassing. The other show they took down was the one about hotels where they're defecating all over the walls and stuff. Those are all being done in places all around the world, not just cathedrals or big fancy mansions, but in Masonic lodges, little places that you would probably never suspect, right? That's the whole idea of hiding in plain sight. So these rituals, I read about the same details over and over, or I certainly would not be repeating things like them eating babies' hearts and stuff, right? And the whole idea about them eating, the whole idea about it going, and this is going to be graphic, but the whole idea of them spending a couple of days doing these rituals. Now, these rituals are to get into their club, right? So they do these rituals, they capture them on film, and the whole idea of going along with these people is to get the same fame and fortune that they have, right? With money that they cooked up and literally printed, right? And all of this is really in exchange for your soul. And they push this idea, hey, you only have one life to live. Grab it all while you can. No one can have too much money or fame. More and more. So essentially, to get into this club, what do you have to do? Well, you get to rape and murder children. You get to engage in cannibalism. You got to be drinking a lot of blood, knocking yourself in the head, or somebody's knocking you in the head to give you those left eyes. And those are acts that an initiated person must partake in order to get into this chosen one club that they're touting, right? And they're claiming that, well, we got the path to eternal life. You want into our club, come and do these rituals. Well, I gotta tell you, this is the strangest entry to get into any kind of a club that I've ever read about. Now, keep in mind, I've never been one to really join clubs and things myself. I've joined a few, but then I tend to not stick around for long. But if somebody said to you, you got to do all these things to show that you're aligned with us at our club, would that really appeal to anybody? I mean, obviously, it's appealing to a lot of people, but just think about the motivation of somebody to want to participate in one of their club activities and, rape children, cook up the blood, do all these kinds of things, spend a couple of days spreading feces all over walls and stuff like that. And this is what they call fun. And this is what people are trading their souls for. I don't know. It just seems like the strangest initiation. And it certainly takes a certain type that would say, yeah, I'll give up my soul. Yeah, go and do all these things. Hey, sign me up. It is strange no matter what way you look at it. So, continuing on here. One thing we need to consider in this timeline also, the Armenians over there in Turkey. The Armenians were genocided also, just like the Germans were, but the Armenians, they killed 75% of the Armenians, also, like the Germans, a predominantly Christian group. The Armenian genocide took place under Turkey's Islamic Ottoman Empire during and after World War II, World War I, right around our time frame. Out of an approximate population of 2 million, some 1.5 million Armenians died. If early 20th century Turkey had the apparatus and technology to execute in mass, such as 1940s Germany did, the entire Armenian population may well have been annihilated. Most American historians who have studied the question unequivocally agree that it was a deliberate, calculated genocide. So why all those Christian Armenians getting genocided along with all those Christian Germans? An interesting name I ran across. Remember Soleimani, the guy who in Iran that under Trump supposedly got hit, taken out? Well, I've said all along that guy's not dead. These Sassoon people, for what it's worth, if anybody's going to check further, the Sassoon, when I was reading about the Sassoons, they have a half brother in Bombay who happened to be named Solomon. So these people, all of them connect. And also, don't forget the show I did about Weimar. Who was running the child sex and all the rampant pornography during Weimar, which I believe they thought they might be able to kick off this new world order during Weimar and had to pull it back in. Well, I remember during that show I was talking about, I was so surprised that only a couple percent of the population were Jews, yet all the Jews were the ones who were running all of the pornography and all of the child rape business. So the Jews would be the Ashkenazi Jews. And don't forget, the Ashkenazi Jews got their name from the German Rhine. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot about the Ashkenazis a second, but Let's talk a little bit about this Talmud. This is what these Orthodox believe in. These are the people in charge right now. The ones over in Israel raping the prisoners and raping the children. The Talmud is what they follow. Their feeling is if a goy, that's what they call us, Goy, gentle, hits a Jew, the goy must be killed. If a Jew finds an object lost by a goy, it does not have to be returned. If a Jew murders a goy, there will be no death penalty. What a Jew steals from a goy, he may keep. Jews may use subterfuges to circumvent a goy. All children of the goyim, the Gentiles, are animals. So there's something very interesting. For some reason, I got drawn back into the, the $1 bill and those symbols there. I missed something pretty big here. And here's what it is. At the top of the pyramid is the Eye of Providence. The Latin motto, Annuet Cocipis, in the sky above, means it, the Eye of Providence, is favorable to our undertakings, or he favors our undertakings. So what does this really mean? Below the pyramid, a scroll reads this, Novus Ordo Secloria. It's Latin for New Order of the Ages, which refers to 1776 as the beginning of the American New Era. And then I was revisiting that eye on the top of the pyramid. And that idea that it means Taurus. Taurus is the same name as Lucifer, okay, or Lightbringer or Morning Star. They always have all these trick names, okay, so let's just go step by step here. Taurus is the same name as Lucifer, Lightbringer, or the Morning Star. So they're referring to that eye as Taurus, which we now know means Lucifer, right? They say that inside every human being, there is one eye connected up to Jesus and one eye connected down to Satan. That explains the all-seeing eye. The light of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, the whole body shall be full of light. But if thine eye be evil, thy whole body shall be full of darkness. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold on to the one and despise the other. And that's from their KJV Bible. So this all-seeing eye, it also relates to that number 6 they flash all around. The hand gesture, when they flash that number 6, means that all-seeing eye. And the providence, the words providence has favored our undertakings, right? So they're saying that this all-seeing eye of providence has favored our undertaking for a new order of the ages. What is the new order of the ages that's being proclaimed? It's another race of beings that are taking over the host body system. It's Lucifer, or Satan's new race of beings taking over the human host body system. Because remember, this is about them believing that they are going to start creating these transhumans or whatever the idea is, right? Because they're challenging our creator that they're going to be making their own race of people. So what is the new order of the ages? It's another race of beings that are taking over the host body system. It's Lucifer. It's Lucifer's new race of beings taking over the human host body system. Well, you can't really argue with this because everything they're giving us is to destroy our DNA, like all of this smart meter business with plutonium. Plutonium is the best way to destroy our DNA. Now, I'm not saying that their plans make any sense, okay? I'm just saying that's what the plan is. So then we look at those pyramids, right? And on the back of the dollar bill, they have the pyramid. So it goes on to say, look at all the pyramids from ancient civilizations around the world, and you will come to realize that not only America, but the whole world is under the shadow of Egypt. Remember in the Bible how it was the Egyptians who enslaved the Hebrew Israelites. The pyramid is your enemy. Well, that makes logical sense also, right? That they would put that pyramid there and have a different meaning, right? Because they say the Egyptians enslaved the Hebrew Israelites. And that's the meaning of that pyramid. And then they went on to say, in what God do they trust? Because they talk about on the money, in God we trust, right? So in what God do they trust? What most people do not understand is that there is a major difference between God and the Lord God in the Bible. They are using this slogan in reverence to their God, Elohim, which is Elohim. So they're using this slogan in reference to their God, Elohim, which is a Hebrew word, and not in reverence to the Lord God. Elohim are angels. They are the rebellious children that listened to Lucifer and went apostate against the Lord God or Jesus Christ. They rebelled against the Lord God of heaven when they listened to Lucifer and created a human host body system in their image to shade, phantom, illusion, idol. They are the ones that the prophet Isaiah said, cover with a covering, but not of my spirit, that they may add sin to sin. The human host body is that covering, and all the Elohim trust in the shadow of Egypt. That's why there are Egyptians obelisk at the three states that control the world: London for finance, Vatican for religion, and Washington for the military. So I'll continue reading. They say, presently, let us concentrate on just one specific and perhaps the most important identifying mark on the reverse of the Great Seal. The numbers represent 1776 in Roman numerals. In Hebrew and Greek, all letters have numerical value, but the Romans used only 6 numerals: D for 500, C for 100, L for 50, X for 10, V for 5, 1 for 1. These 6 letters add up to 666. You will see now how cleverly and subtly occult numerology and geometry is woven into this seal. The Pythagoreans believed that the source of all truth was hidden in geometric symbolism, with the triangle especially as the most sacred of all symbols, where the tenorite is regarded as the key to unlocking all hidden wisdom. Now put 3 triangles in a row starting with M. Place the Roman numerals representing 1776 in the same sequence. So what they say is the top one adds up to 1110. The bottom row is the perfect Roman numeral order, which adds up to 666. What does this all mean? There are 9 numerals in 1776, just the right number for 3 triangles. And I'm going to publish this down below because it starts to, you really need to kind of read it to get how they're converting these numbers. But what the point here is that if you unlock the numbers according to this other way, because what they're saying is this, excuse me. The number 9 was sacred to Pythagoreans and thus Freemasonry because it represented the perfect square, meaning 9, of the perfect number 3. 9, interestingly enough, is also the number of Satan in Satanism. Well, that explains that, right? So the bottom line is this. All those numbers, which we were told mean 1776, if you look at it, according to these Pythagoreans, that's Pythogoreas, then the numbers change drastically, right? They're not actually Roman numerals. So it went on to say also the old Babylonian numbering and monetary system was sexagemal. That's Sexagemal. That is based upon 6 or 60. They had 60 cents to their dollar. In fact, we still use the old Babylonian system to measure time. 60 seconds to the minute, 60 minutes to the hour. Hold on a second here. Sorry about that. The new Babylonian, which is considered America's numbering and monetary system, is centennial, based on multiples of 10. Let me get settled here a minute. Okay, so the new Babylonian, which they're referring to America as the new Babylon, numbering and monetary system is centennial, based on multiples of 10. By decoding the Roman numerals on the Great Seal, representing 1776, we find both the old Babylonian and the new modern American system of exchange. Mathematically, 1110 old Babylonian dollars are equal to 666 American, or the new Babylonian dollars. These two figures, 1110 and 666, are skillfully codified into the number 1776, the founding of the American Republic and the beginning of America as the biblical Babylon the Great, together with its mystery religion. The eye radiating in all directions is actually the all-seeing eye that symbolizes the terrorists, Gestapo-like espionage agencies that are supreme illuminists. Illuminist Adam Weishaupt set up to guard the secret of the order and to terrorize the populace into the acceptance of its rule. And that's another meaning for that eye is the eye. Let me scroll back up here. The eye radiating in all directions is the all spying, SPY. So it's actually the all spying eye, not the all seeing eye. Certainly another way to look at it, right? So, and then all these 13s, right? We have the prominence of the number 13, America, with Mansea, the 13th tribe. 13 states signed the Declaration of Independence. 13 stars are above the eagle on the American seal. 13 letters form the motto E pluribus unum, one of many. 13 leaves are on the olive branch on the left talon. 13 olives also are on the left talon of the U.S. shield. 13 arrows are on the right talon of the shield. 13 stripes are featured on the shield. 13 stars were on the original U.S. flag, Old Glory. 13 stripes were also on the Old Glory. 13 stripes still feature on the current flag of the USA. And whatever this means, it says America is Manasseh, Manasseh, because of the meaning of its name. Don't know what that means. So this is something that I missed and a lot of people miss when they talk about this. Above the bald eagle on that $1 bill is set a 6-pointed star made up of 13 smaller stars that actually resemble the Jewish Star of David. So right above the bald eagle, if I knew this, I must have blanked out and forgotten it. But right above the bald eagle, those 13 stars, you can draw the lines and you end up drawing that Jewish Star of David, which also we know is satanic. And what they said was ABC News reported that former Housing and Urban Development Director Dr. Ben Carson told an applicable tale that ascribed the star shape to Jewish financier Haim Solomon. He said that so obviously Dr. Ben Carson acknowledged that that thing right above there, when you draw lines through it, it comes out a star, the Star of David thing, right? And he went on to say, this man helped fund the American Revolution to the tune of nearly $700,000, an enormous sum at that time. In gratitude, the star above the eagle was patterned after the Star of David to honor his contributions as a Jew to the American war effort. But as Florida Jewish Notes indicates, the story of the star is probably just a myth. No, actually, the story of that star actually should have all of our attention, right? So why is that satanic, specifically that satanic symbol on the U.S. right above that eagle? And I'll be playing a clip here as far as maybe I already played, I don't remember. But anyways, I have been going over on my website all of that information that we got from that person, Israel Seuss. When I was going down, I need to go and look at it later because I have other things that I need to focus on first. But here's what I found that was interesting. Remember, I talked about the KKK happened to happen around that time. Well, we have this person in this country called David Duke, and he's supposedly the former Grand Wizard of the KKK, and he is the current agent of the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. There's an interesting history between all of that whole deal in Louisiana and those French people. But anyway, here's my point. So David Duke, who, we see on the news all the time acting like he's promoting the KKK, right? Well, he's actually one of them, of course, right? And when I looked at the picture of the KKK again, and of course it was yellow background and it had a griffin on it. So right there on the front of the Grand Wizard of the KKK uniform is that griffin, right? So also when I was scanning through that stuff, at the bottom of that genealogy, the bushes are a mess. The pictures didn't transfer. But anyways, there was one woman, she was the CIA director during all that awful stuff when they were the prisoners at Abu Ghraib that were horribly tortured. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, what a psycho that woman is. Well, come to find out, that psycho woman, her name is Gina Haspel. And Gina Haspel is actually related to the Bushes because Barbara Bush, no, not Barbara, who's the wife? George's wife. The one that they said was a sweet teacher. Well, anyway, George W. Bush's wife, she is actually a Walker who married a Haspel. So direct relationship to the Bushes was that brutal person torturing those people. Just a little side note. So I looked again at what they likely got rid of when they blew into Iraq and said, because I talked in the last show, if you haven't followed the last two shows, it's going to sound foreign to you, but I can't do anything about that. If you do, the links will be down below if you want to watch that. But here's what happened. Housed with Baghdad's National Library was an immense collection of 12 million books, manuscripts, and carved stone tables detailing the nation's long history. The 2003 Library and Archive came under attack. They were intent on destroying records of the Ba'athist regime. They deployed petrol bombs and other incendiary devices throughout the building. The fire consumed much of the library's collection, and then looters had their way with what remained. The destruction of these documents is not just a great historical loss, but a huge loss to Iraq's cultural heritage. They say, although an effort to compile and restore the remaining documents is currently ongoing, those lost during the fire remain irreplaceable. So what was lost, right? What was lost, and why was it lost? I found another interesting quote. It said, when America entered the war, it became possible for the Allies to bomb German towns around the clock. Centuries-old castles, cathedrals, medieval villages were needlessly destroyed. Well, they were destroyed on purpose at this late stage. See, everybody's really starting to wonder, like, gee, why'd they destroy all these things when the war was over? Well, because they had to get rid of evidence, right? But it said centuries-old castles, cathedrals, and medieval villages were needlessly destroyed at this late stage. The birthhouses of Bach, Dürer, and Goethe. And here it gets interesting. What else did they destroy? Well, they just happened to destroy Martin Luther landmarks. The ancient book district, libraries, and universities were all targets. Allied bombings destroyed well over 1/3 of all German books, as its universities and libraries and museums were unnecessarily obliterated. No, I think they were obliterated on purpose. Why? Now there is a possibility. It's usually the simple answer, right? Well, because people would question, well, Germany was really good to these Ashkenazis, right? Because Germany let them hang around there. Uh, I believe they were plotting against us while they were hanging around Germany. Because remember, prior to Tavistock, they were hanging around Germany, cooking up the Frankfurt School. That's where they were coming up with all these ways to model society. That was all happening in Germany. I believe they start off as Marxists, and that's where this whole thing is feeding back to, but not my point for right now. But anyway, so why would they want to get rid of these Martin Luther landmarks and all these libraries and universities? Well, the simple answer could be this. Even though Germany was one place that was very good to the Ashkenazis when they were under that name, they sure turned on them when they became the Nazis, right? So that would be the act of a psychopath. They will take food from one hand and bite off your other hand. So could they have ended up venturing through Germany and the Rhine area where they got the Ashkenazi name? Yeah, well, that's where their DNA traces them to, right? So it could be that this is just how you define a psychopath. They will let you house them and feed them, but when the moment is right, they will literally snap your neck off. So, because all of this DNA business, right? They come from a specific DNA group. They do not come from those ancient places. So, in looking around further, I talked in the last show as far as the genocide of the Germans. Here's a little bit more about how it got started, because I always say, look at the beginning of these things, right? So at the Potsdam Conference, the Allies dispensed justice to the defeated Germans and endorsed a so-called orderly and humane expulsion of millions of ethnic Germans from Poland, Czechoslovakia, and other Eastern European nations. This is an official endorsement of ethnic cleansing and genocide by governments of nations unprecedented in world history. Omitted from the history books, after World War II, the Allies carried out the largest forced population transfer, nowadays referred to as ethnic cleansing in human history. So in all of human history, this deal they did to the Germans, because it's called ethnic cleansing and genocide. So nowadays referred to as ethnic cleansing in human history. Between 12 and 14 million citizens, the majority women, children, and the elderly, were driven out of their homes. By mid-1945, not merely the largest forced migration, but probably the largest single movement of population in human history was underway, an operation that continued for the next 5 years. Now, this is after the war, okay? Or supposedly we thought the war was over. Between 12 and 14 million civilians, the overwhelming majority of them were driven out of their homes, or if they had already fled the advancing Red Army in the last days of the war, they were forcibly prevented from returning to them. Not only was the treatment of the expellees in defiance of the principles for which the Second World War had professed being fought, it created numerous and persistent legal complications. At the Nuremberg trials, for example, the Allies were trying the surviving Nazi leaders on charges of carrying out deportation and other inhumane acts against civilian populations. At the same time, as less than 100 miles away, they were engaging in large-scale forced removals of their own. Similar problems arose within the UN's 1948 Genocide Convention, the first draft of which outlawed the forced and systematic exile of individuals representing the culture of a group. And here, so 1948, the UN's Genocide Convention wants to stop the forced exile of groups, right? Well, what happened to that? Well, if you guessed that the USA had something to do with this, you would win the prize for today. This provision was deleted from the final version at the insistence of the U.S. delegate, who pointed out that it might be interpreted as embracing forced transfers of minority groups such as have already been carried out by members of the United Nations. They say that I don't know what they're trying to say there, but they didn't stop it because of the United States. To the present day, expelling states continue to go to great lengths to exclude it. So yeah, that's a pretty big deal. They claim it's the biggest mass movement of people in the entire history, and it was those poor German people. So what in the heck is that all about? So I'm going to be, I have just some odds and ends here. Also, many photographs from the turn of the 20th century appear to show deserted city streets in many capital cities across the world. When people do start to appear in the photographs, there is a striking contrast between the horse and cart dwellers in the muddy streets and the elaborate, highly ornate stone megastructures which tower above the inhabitants of the city, which is seen even in modern cities where extreme poverty is contrasted with skyscrapers. Well, the people in those pictures, that is a big thing with a lot of these people showing pictures about what they claim. And if you back in the old day, we actually had to put film into a camera, right? So, and there was nothing to stop you from opening up that camera back and exposing your film. So if you expose your film, you end up with white spots and stuff, right? Which could appear to be like people missing. But then I have this other idea. Maybe they're not showing people in the streets because people in the streets were black and they don't want to show all those black faces. Just something to think about. So there is something about the contrast in those pictures. And it went on to say Moorish buildings have existed in the United States since before the 18th century, primarily in the Southwest, where former Spanish citizens brought with them an architecture sense influenced by years of Muslim rule in Spain. Southwestern buildings were often made of adobe, a sun-dried brick that takes its name from the Arabic word for brick, at-obi. They also make this claim that Moorish science is and has remained the foundation of all secret societies. It was under the influence of Arabian and Moorish revival of culture, and not in the 50s. So they're saying that, well, remember, they want to paint themselves as being geniuses, right? So if you look further, you will find that they claim that the Moors invented all this science business, right? Well, I mean, they don't really talk much about the horrible things the Moors did, so you got to fill it in with good things, right? I found this other quote. A Moorish or African emperor, Abu Bakari, took 1,000 ships to the New World in the 1300s. So Moorish navigators and seamen were highly sought in those days than the previously land-bound Europeans were in their fancy in navigational and maritime sciences. And they also claim that there was a guy called Pio de Jesus Pico. He was also the last Mexican governor of California. So they're claiming that in total, in the 1800s, there were at least 4 black governors of the state of California. I find that pretty amazing because I was born in California, and then we returned to California when my father retired. So I spent the majority of my life there, and we did not run into black kids. California is not what I would call, at least during that time, a state loaded with black people. So the fact that they had 4 black governors during that era is another interesting point here, right? So, and here's another date to take a look at. It said the Moors controlled much of North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula, which was Spain, from 711 AD until their expulsion in 1492. In 1492, that's when those started the Tartaria business, right? The Tartari and all that Ottoman stuff started around 1492. And also Christopher Columbus was flying all over the place. So it went on to say they were known for their architecture, science, philosophy, and the high value they placed on education. But their chief interests were mathematics and astronomy. The Moors who ruled Spain for 800 years introduced new scientific techniques to Europe, such as the astrolabe, a device for measuring the position of the stars and planets. Scientific progress in astronomy, chemistry, physics, mathematics, geography, and philosophy flourished in Moorish Spain. Who knows? Any of that true? Don't really know. And then I found some more about this idea about Atlantis. Remember I said when I was young, Atlantis was also a big deal. Well, if you consider, I believe this is a game board, so I'm not really sure why on a game board there would be these secret planets in the top, right? Is there something underneath us or something above us or what's going on here? So, but the idea of Atlantis being a physical place was popularized by that woman, Helen Blavatsky, that woman who also spread a lot of bad information. Helena Blavatsky, Blavatsky. And she lived between 1831 to 1891. So she popularized the idea that Atlantis was a physical place. Okay, so I have a little bit more about that below here, but let's get to the good part here. America, Amarcuous. We're told that America was named after the explorer Amerigo Vespucci. But the name more likely comes from the Incan two-headed serpent god Amaru, Amaru, which means plumed serpent or feathered serpent. Amaruca, Amaruca, is literally translated land of the plumed serpents. And remember in the past, I talked about the Vatican. The word Vatican comes from Latin and is a contradiction of two words in the following way. Vatus for prophetic or diviner, and can for serpent or snake. These two words combined make the prophetic or made divine serpent. So America literally translates to land of the plumed serpents. I would have to agree with that. All these psychopaths are running around. Okay. The Vatican is a place, so you may say the Vatican means the place of the phonetic and worship serpent. Yeah, so they also went on to say Europa, the goddess after which Europe is named, is an appellate of Isis. It's Isis again, right? So Europa is a goddess after which Europe is named, is an appellation of Isis, or the goddess of 10,000 names, including Mary, the Queen of Heaven. If these gods are indeed principalities over the regions of the earth, Protestantism and its revivals could never have flourished in Europe like it did in America. This history has much bearing on America's great revivals, which served to both lead Christianity back to papal teachings and the mystery schools, and to cover for its false gospels, which were unable to produce genuine Christian experience. Okay, let me see here. Let me go back here. That says, okay, Europa is that god, right? And it said, if these gods are indeed principalities over the regions of the earth, Protestantism and its revivalisms could never have flourished in Europe like it did in America. And remember, Protestantism, I think they're talking about Martin Luther, right? So it went on to say, this history has much bearing on America's great revivals, which served to both lead Christianity. Yeah, I don't really know. So to lead Christianity back to papal teachings and the mystery schools, and to cover for its false gospels, which were unable to produce genuine Christian experiences. And there was this other quote that says, turning to a different gospel, which is really no gospel at all. So there is this person, and I'm putting their link down below. They took this apart piece by piece and did a pretty brilliant job about it. And I'm just going to scan the surface. All the links from the last show, there are tons and tons of links. Those are not below. I added just a couple new links because there were so many of them. So a lot of these things I'll be talking about today, like the gypsies and stuff I'll be getting to in a minute here, you'll find those links on the last show, not on this show. So let's try to tackle this. First, they start off with, well, they have a lot. I'm just going to scan through some parts. So most of what I'm going to be leaving you with are things to read for yourself. I'm very, very sick, so I'm not going to turn this into 100 different shows and also to, read things that you could be reading for yourself is the bottom line here. So this first one is the Statue of Liberty. The original symbol of America was a Moorish black Muslim woman named Columbia. Why Muslim? Well, because this country was founded on Islam. It was the Moors, M-U-U-R-S, who established and taught the European government. This is why elite Europeans call themselves Shriners, aka Muslim sons, and wear the Moorish Turkish fez in secret. I've been chasing this Fez hat for a few years now. So in secret, the Europeans call themselves Shriners. They also have that Shriner Hospital, but let me just focus on what it's reading here. Okay, so they say they call themselves Europeans, elite Europeans call themselves Shriners, aka Muslim sons, and wear the Moorish fez in secret. All of the so-called founders of the country have a holy Quran, and it was Morocco, Indiana, that first recognized the United States as a nation. Pretty crazy, right? So they're saying that Morocco, Indiana, and I've done shows that go through all the different places in this country that have these names. So I'm not going to go there right now. So they say that also in this post is an image of a Berber or a Moorish woman wearing an ancient headdress that is identical to the headdress worn by the Greek goddess Columbia, as in District of Columbia and Columbia Motion Pictures, as the Statue of Liberty. According to Wikipedia, Columbia is the personification of America and is a symbol of liberty and freedom. Columbia is the female national personification of the United States. It was also a historical name applied to the Americas and to the New World. The association has given rise to the names of many American places and objects and institutions and companies, such as Columbia University, District of Columbia, Hail Columbia, as well as the ship Columbia Redivia, which gives its name to the Columbia River. Images of the Statue of Liberty, which mean liberty enlightening the world, erected in 1886, personified Columbia as the female symbol of the United States around 1920. Although Lady Liberty was seen as an aspect of Columbia. The statues of the Greek goddess Columbia Yes, Columbia was a Mennonite or a black Indian or Moor. So Columbia, the statue that greets people coming to this slave country. I'm just kidding, slave country, right? Columbia was a black Indian or Moor before she was whitewashed to reflect a white European woman. And they went on to say, I have a whitewashed image of Columbia wearing a Moorish fez and the American flag. Additionally, the Barbary Treaties of 1776 to 1836 between the U.S. and the Barbary State, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1776/1836 between Morocco and the United States, and House Resolution 75. They've written, this is from 1933. It said, demonstrates the Moor presence right here in America. All of these said treaties are treaties of the U.S., are of the supreme law of the land per article. The said treaties demonstrate the existence of a Mohammedan, as called a Mahometan nation right here in America, formerly known as Al Morocco, aka the Northern Gate. And it said this country was not founded on Christianity per the Treaty of Tripoli, as the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion, as it has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslimin or Muslims, and as the said states never entered into any war or act of hostility against any Mahometan nation. It is declared by the parties that no pretext arising from religious opinions shall ever produce an interruption of the harmony existing between the two countries. So I don't know. They have these treaties. I looked at them. I mean, they're right here to click on and take a look yourself. So they said this country was founded on the science of Islam because the Olmec Moors from Mount Murray or Mother Mary were the first ones in America, and they brought the science of Islam, Sufism, Masonry along with them. The Morocco of North Africa wasn't established until 1956. Therefore, the Morocco that first recognized the U.S. in 1777 as a nation couldn't have been the Morocco that was established in North Africa in 1956, because the 1956 Morocco was not around in 1777. The Morocco that it is referring to is all Morocco. That's AL-Morocco, which means the farthest most west. North America is a continent that is in the far west. Morocco, which means the farthest most west, is an ancient name for America. This was not the only name for America, but it did exist very recently on paper, as you can see. I'm going to be putting this on hold, and I'll be back with more in a bit here.
Even the students, most students have heard about Tay-Sachs, but short of Tay-Sachs and maybe one or two other disorders, they rarely, if ever, have heard about Gaucher or any of the other Ashkenazi Jewish diseases. Ashkenazi Jews, which represent about 75% of American Jewry, we married our first cousins for approximately 200 generations. We have a greater burden of genetic disease because, in fact, many of us are related. We're cousins. We may be distant cousins, but in fact, the literature indicates that approximately 42% of us are related to one of 4 women that lived between the 12th and 13th century. When you think about that, and the list of genetic disorders that appear to be more prevalent in the Ashkenazi Jewish population, you're actually looking at a likelihood that 1 out of 4 persons of Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry will be a carrier for at least one of the top 16 to 17 disorders.
Oh, okay, I'm back. I can't remember when I got going on those Fez hats, but those hats are something else, right? That's when I first discovered when the hat of Santa looked just like the hat the Pope was wearing. Those round hats they wear, which they call yarmulkes and other things, that really is a nod to Saturn, that ring, that red ring you see those popes and stuff wearing. Okay, so last we figured out that Morocco, that they're referred to, is really all Morocco, which means the farthest most west. So Al Morocco, which means the farthest most west, is an ancient name for America. So then they go on to say, in this blog post is an image of a gold coin valued at $100 of the original Statue of Liberty, aka Lady Liberty. It said, yes, Lady Liberty appears in a new light as a Blackmore woman in a $100 gold coin that officials at the U.S. Mint have announced. But what could it be? Its meaning. And so here are some compiled notes and research points. And I gotta say, this person did an excellent job. So they went through some of these different coins, and here's what they said. They found a 2017 American Liberty 225th anniversary gold coin shows a Moor's head in profile with a crown of stars. It features the year of the Philadelphia Mint founding, 1792, as well as 2017. The reverse side of the coin depicts an eagle in flight. And remember, I first got started on these Moor's heads when that Pope had a Moor's head on his family crest. So I'll keep reading. This mint stuff ends up being very interesting. In 1792, the Philadelphia Mint was created from the need to establish a national identity and the needs of commerce in the United States because of the newly found indigenous wealth. So they found a need to come up with the Philadelphia Mint to come up with money for a national identity, and because of the newfound indigenous wealth. Now, these people are doing nothing but stealing and thieves, right? So it said this led the founding fathers of the United States to make an establishment of a continental national mint, a main priority after the ratification of the Constitution of the United States. The Coinage Act of 1792 was entered into law on April the 2nd. It proclaimed the creation of the United States Mint. Philadelphia at that time was the nation's capital because of the Treaty of Peace and Friendship between Morocco and the United States established under the sacred elm tree of Sagamore tenement. Therefore, the first mint facility was built there. The Mint Act also instituted a decimal system based on a dollar unit, specified weights, metallic composition, and fineness, and required each United States coin to feature an impression emblematic of liberty. So here's another piece that I pulled from that article is really long, so I encourage you to take a look at it. It says, we need to get out of our feelings and understand that more is the ancient and proper way of calling someone with dark skin black. Moors were black people of all faiths and customs and not just Islam. There are also two sets of Moors. The Moors, spelled with a double O, that's M-O-O-R, are the Moors from Europe and Africa. The Moors, spelled with the M-U-U-R, are the Moors from MU/Atlantis, aka Lemuria, the Americas. Keep in mind that you have the title Moor in the, Mar in the word America. Yeah, that is right. A-M, America. So, in fact, Moors are Indians. And here's the evidence. Yeah, this stuff really starts to get going here. They say they were from a tribe of Berber Indians, aka Moors from India. I don't know. They say Islam comes from Sufism. Yeah, there's a lot here. I mean, just a lot. So the authorities have paid agents to go on smear campaigns against the Moors by placing all Moors under the Islamic title and by labeling only the Moors as traitors to the Black Moor race, when all races have traitors of all faiths and all nationalities. This is all by design because being a Moor ties you back to not only land, but also back to royalty. You see, the king's knights learned the king's law, common law, and they enforced it. For example, the first sheriffs and bailiffs were Moorish knights. You see, the word sheriff comes from the Arabic word sharif, which means noble. The word bailiff comes from the Hebrew word bey, which means lord and or governor. Which is interesting because sheriffs are the ones that hang around the courtrooms, and most sheriffs have a six-star badge, right? Then it went on to say, get the Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, and look up the word Moor, M-O-O-R. You will discover that one Moor equals 100 bailiffs. An officer in Isle of Man who summons the courts for the several I don't know. There's a lot to all this, but yeah, I think we pretty much got the idea that the Moors are indigenous to the Americas. In fact, Morocco that first recognized the United States as a nation. In 1777, it was Morocco, Indiana. So that's where we're looking at this stuff, right? The word Indian comes from the Latin indios, which means the black people who are with God. When Columbus first came to America, he landed in the West Indies. So he called the Moors, who was already over here, Indians, because Moor and Indian is all the same nationality, because they are both the Khmer or Khan, Khan, people from India. that civilized world. So these European Masons took a blood oath to never reveal to the children of the Moors who they truly were. They say, what your history books fail to tell you. I don't know. George Washington, chairman of the Continental Congress of 1774, is documented saying this: if we would agree to take the fezzes and turbans off the Moors' heads and remove the sandals from their feet and enforce it with severe punishments, and also swear a death oath between ourselves to religiously and faithfully not allow anyone to teach the Moorish children who they really are or who their forefathers are, and only allow the Moorish children to be taught that they were truly Negroes, black people, and colored folks. George Washington stated that 200 years from today, the Moorish people would not know their nationality, nor the national name of their forefathers. Also, they would not know from which land or ancestors they had descended from. So, they go through all of this, that they were descendants of this one, they did that, and they show all these maps, show all this stuff. I have to say, what these people have done is pretty phenomenal about how they've traced it. So if you have any hesitation, matter of fact, here's one reference. They said, they talked about, remember, these people believe in multiple gods. The Hollywood movie Maleficent is based off the concept of the virgin moher, M-O-H-U-R, female. In the movie, Maleficent, that's Meleficent, referred to herself as Queen of the Moors, or the land. The Avengers movie shows you the Moravian king as the falcon Horus with his wings flying around like the dragon king, Christ king that he was. Was Jesus a dragon? They say, I believe so, because he was a magi or magician that referred to himself in the book of Psalm as a worm. Okay, now we're getting good. Okay, so what they're saying here is that Jesus was a magi or magician. Yeah, this is all about magic now, isn't it? That referred to himself in the book of Psalms about as a worm, which translates to a dragon or a serpent. Okay, so we're back at the serpent. It said, the Lord said of himself, I am a worm or dragon and not man. And that's in the KJV Bible. It said Jesus never referred to himself as Christian because he was a pagan. They were all pagans before they conditioned us with religion, which is just a tool to control the masses. The most female virgin goddesses symbolism comes from the constellation Virgo, or the Virgin. Virgo was impregnated by God on the spring equinox as the sun passed into Virgo on March 21st. 9 months later, the Son of God is born on the winter solstice. God's Son, or S-U-N or S-O-N, is born, or rather reborn, every year after the sun stops at the Tropic of Capricorn. Well, I don't know, but they say the Virgin Goddess Columbia was just an old manifestation of the ancient consort and Virgin Mother of God. Depicted in Christianity as the Virgin Mary, Columbia was created out of Virginia and Maryland. And that's right, because right in the center, you have Washington, D.C., and that monstrously huge phallic symbol, right? And then on each side, you have Maryland or Mary and Virginia or Virgin, right? So they say that depicted in Christianity as the Virgin Mary, Columbia was created out of Virginia and Maryland. To the Masons, the square is the female aspect, since a woman has 4 dimensions and is the foundation of civilization. Washington, D.C. is a 10 by 10 square mile radius, which is more evidence suggesting that the District of Columbia is based on and named after the ancient Moorish woman, i.e., the Virgin Goddess Columbia, which is also Isis. This makes sense because in ancient times, societies were matriarchal and ruled by women. So yeah, they have all that symbolism all over the place. And they have, what they have done is they said in Egypt, the Trinity consists of Isis. The Trinity consists of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, the sun. Isis can be seen as the ultimate female deity. Isis may be the oldest deity in Egypt, and certainly the oldest to survive the ages in much the same form. It said she may also be the most important, for although the other gods were worshipped widely, however, all Egyptians worship Isis, the major goddess of the Egyptian pantheon. She had many of the same attributes of other mother goddesses found all over the world. Isis was as powerful, if not more powerful, than Osiris and Ra. So, yeah, Isis and all this Isis business, right? She was also the light giver. Yeah, so Isis is somebody to really take a look at. And also that owl. Who are you going to call? The owl on those Tartaria flags. Mainly they have the griffin, but they also use the owl. The owl also symbolizes the eagle, phoenix, bat, and or monarch butterfly, since a speedy bone that houses your pineal gland sits in the center of your brain and is shaped like an owl, a bat, or a phoenix, or a monarch butterfly. The dragon, which is your Kundalini serpentine system, and the phoenix should never be at war with each other, since they are husband and wife, Draco and Phoenix. Yeah, I don't know. You'll have to take a look at that stuff. They say you'll see there's also images of the U.S. Capitol buildings in Washington, D.C., in the center of the owl's head. Yeah, they have all that owl symbolism. Also, remember at Bohemian Grove, they have that big owl deal. So anyway, so there is a ton more here. So let me get back to, so anyhow, so I think this Atlanta stuff got started by it got revived by Alice Miller, all those people. And here's an interesting quote. It said, "The prime work of the church is to teach and teach ceaselessly, preserving the outer appearance in order to reach the many who are accustomed to church usages." Yeah, see, we've all seen these things, right? They've all been in our heads. Let me get down here to this gypsy stuff because I need to close off here. Um, so yeah, I talked about Europe already being merry. I have it here. Give me a second here. Also those asylums. Um, let me see here. The numbers of the asylums, according to populations, do not justify the immense size of the buildings or the number of people they claim were committed. They say in California, at the very onset of the California gold rush of 1849, we see several insane asylums said to be erected to house those deemed insane as early as 1851. Yeah, those insane asylums, they were all mansions. It went on to say the other blatantly obvious note is that these immense insane asylums nearly look identical all around the world in what they call Gothic and Roman architecture. Yeah, and I swear it has been nothing but cut and paste, right? They call it New Roman, Old Roman. Okay, so um, pilgrims, let's get to them. The term pilgrim has become synonymous with these early settlers. However, there's a catch. The word pilgrim is believed to be a corruption of the Latin word peregrinos, which means a wanderer or traveler from a foreign land. The Moors, who were North African Muslims that had a significant influence on European culture, particularly in Spain, referred to these travelers as peregrinos, recognizing them as foreigners and wanderers. When the English settlers or peregrinos arrived in North America, they encountered the indigenous population, the Aboriginal tribes and bands who had their own rich and diverse cultural traditions. As the pilgrims settled and began to adapt to their new environment, their attitude, their attire of what they were wearing evolved. They adopted a form of the fez, fez hat. So the pilgrims adopted the Fez hat and modified it by blackening the material and added a brim to protect against the harsh weather conditions of the New England climate. Well, this brings us back to those people in Turkey, right? During Ottoman, what were they wearing? Well, nothing but Fez hats, right? This modified headgear became a symbol of the pilgrims and was distinct from the traditional English hats of the time. The transformation of the fez into a pilgrim's headdress is seen by some as the influence of the ancient Moabite Moorish nations on these English settlers. The Moors' influence on the pilgrims is an example of how cultures are intertwined. Yes, boy, aren't they ever, right? So, yeah, let me see here. So yeah, I've got them wearing those hats, right? So that further confirms that those pilgrims were in fact the same as the Moors. So they say that their adoption and adaptation of the fez into what is commonly recognized as the pilgrim headdress could be seen as a symbol of the cultural exchanges that occurred, albeit often one-sided. Yeah, that was on purpose. They say because of the far-reaching impact of the Moors on the New World. Yeah, the legacy of the pyramids is twofold. Yeah, of course, it's all the same group of people buzzing around, right? And so let me see here. It said, the Pilgrim experience, recognizing both their contribution. The story of the Pilgrims is not just about who wore the darkened Fez-inspired headdress that they just so happen to wear in Turkey with a brim, but also about those whose lives were irrevocably changed by their landing in 1620. So, yeah, they're wearing that same hat, right? Okay, let me get down here to the gypsies. Those gypsies are also here. And if I have something that I missed, I will be coming back to it later. But for right now, I just want to finish this file and close it off for this day. So, gypsies. Okay, here's the gypsies. Okay, so I have just been suspicious in my head about the gypsies for a long time. I don't know why. I think the name Roma was my first clue. Roma, Rome, Italy. And so, like I said the other day, if you're suspicious about something, go over to Yandex. And all I typed in was, let me see here. I think I typed in gypsies are Jews. And that's, and then I came up with pay dirt on all this stuff. So, a very small size of the original population is suggested by the fact that although most of the migrants arriving in Europe remained within the limits of the Ottoman Empire, the overall number of Romas, the Gypsies, in its Balkan provinces in the 15th century was only estimated at 17,000. Today, there are 10 to 12 million Gypsies in Europe, a larger number than the population of several countries. In the United States, now it's always about what they also leave out, right? So, just so happens, just like all that business about intersex and stuff, right? Intersex before these transgender stuff, it's convenient to leave these things out, right? It's about omission. In the United States, the Gypsies are undocumented by the U.S. citizen. One approximation is that there are 1 million Gypsies in the U.S. The Gypsy population continues to grow. Gypsy girls traditionally marry between the ages of 14 and 17. So, ethnic, okay. So they say the genetic studies confirm that the Romani people originated in India. Gee, just so happened where those Sassoons were over there, right? Now here's where it gets interesting. So get out those pads and paper, paper and pen. Some terms for the Romani people trace to their origin to conflation with the Egyptians. The English term gypsy or gypsy, Gipsy, originates from the Middle English Gypian, short for Egyptian. The Spanish term gitano and French gitan have similar etymologies. They're ultimately derived from the Greek meaning Egyptian via Latin. So gypsy means Egyptian, which actually makes a great deal of sense because if you look at Egyptian and you look at gypsy, right? So this designation owes its existence to the belief common in the Middle Ages that the Roma or some related group, such as the Indian Dom people, were itinerant Egyptians. Roma gypsies originated in the Punjab region of northern India and were called gypsies because people thought they were from Egypt. The largest Romani Gypsy population in the world are in the United States and Brazil. The first Roma gypsies to reach the Americas arrived with Columbus in 1492 as slaves. The Gypsy Roma word for Holocaust, meaning devouring. 500,000 were exterminated by the Nazis, and apart from the Jews, they were the only people condemned for purely racial reasons. Throughout the following centuries, non-Roma, or they called them Gage, continually tried to either assimilate the Roma people or kill them. Attempts to assimilate Roma involved stealing their children and placing them with other families, giving them cattle and feed, expecting them to become farmers, outlawing their customs, language, and clothing, and forcing them to attend school and church. Decrees, laws, and mandates often allowed the killing of Roma people. Starting to sound more and more like the Jews here, right? So I'll keep reading here. In 1725, King Frederick William I of Prussia ordered all Romas over 18 years old to be hanged. A practice of gypsy hunting was common, a game hunt similar to fox hunting. Even as late as 1835, a gypsy hunt in Jutland or Denmark brought in a bag of over 260 men, women, and children. Boy, this is sounding familiar to their hunting children, right? So they were hunting gypsies, right? Though the Roma had undergone centuries of such persecution, it remained relatively random and sporadic until the 20th century, when the negative stereotypes became intrinsically molded into a racial identity, and the Roma were systematically slaughtered. The persecution of the Roma started at the beginning of the Third Reich. Roma was arrested and interned in concentration camps as well as sterilized under the July 1933 law for the prevention of hereditary disease offspring. In the beginning, Roma were not specifically named as a group that threatened the Aryan German people. This was because under Nazi racial ideology, Romas were Aryans. The Nazis had a problem. How could they persecute a group enveloped in negative stereotypes, but supposedly part of the Aryan super race? Nazi racial researchers eventually came upon a so-called scientific reason to persecute most of the Roma. They found it in this book, and it says, the Gypsies have indeed retained some elements from their Nordic home, but they are descendants from the lowest classes of the population in that region. In the course of their migrations, they have absorbed the blood of the surrounding peoples and have thus become an Oriental, Western Asiatic racial mixture with an addition of Indian, Mid-Asiatic, and European strains. Their nomadic mode of living is a result of this mixture. The Gypsies will generally affect Europe as aliens. With this belief, the Nazis needed to determine who was pure Roma and who was mixed. Thus, in 1936, the Nazis established the Racial Hygiene and Population Biology Research Unit, with this Dr. Ritter at its head, to study the Roma problem and to make recommendations for Nazi policy. As with the Jews, the Nazis needed to determine who was to be considered a gypsy. Dr. Ritter decided that someone could be considered a gypsy if they had one or two gypsies among his grandparents, or if two or more of his grandparents are part gypsies. They blamed Dr. Ritter for an additional 18,000 German Roma who were killed because of this more inclusive designation, rather than if the same rules had been followed as were applied to Jews, who needed 3 or 4 Jewish grandparents to be considered Jews. To study Roma, Dr. Ritter and his assistant and his research team visited the Roma concentration camps and examined thousands of Romas, documenting, registering, interviewing, photographing, and finally categorizing them. It was from this research that Dr. Ritter formulated that 90% of Roma were of mixed blood and thus dangerous. Having established a scientific reason to persecute 90% of the Roma, the Nazis just needed to decide what to do with the other 10%. The ones who were nomadic and appear to have the least number of Aryan qualities. At times, Interior Minister Heinrich Himmler discussed letting the pure Roma roam relatively freely and also suggested a special reservation for them. Assumably, as part of one of these possibilities, 9 Roma representatives were selected in October 1942 and told to create lists of Sinti and Laleri to be saved. However, there must have been confusion with the Nazi leadership. Many wanted all the Romas killed with no exceptions. On December the 3rd, 1942, Martin Bormann wrote in a letter to Himmler, "A special treatment would mean a fundamental deviation from the simultaneously measures for fighting the Gypsy menace and would not be understood at all by the population and lower leaders of the party. Also, the Fuhrer would not agree to giving one section of the Gypsies their old freedom. Though the Nazis did not discover a scientific reason to kill the 10% of Romans categorized as pure, no distinctions were made when Romas were ordered to Auschwitz or deported to other death camps. By the end of the war, an estimated 250 to 500,000 Roma were murdered, killing approximately 3/4 of the German Roma and half of the Austrian Roma. So, well, why the Romas, right? Why the Romas? To the Jews and the rest, let's see. I don't know. I don't have an answer for you. Was this a reason to wipe out all of those gypsies? They say that the followers of the Babylonian Talmud have full moral right to fatten, cheat, and rob, and even kill, and to perceive them as fools and lower race. And there is an unwritten code of gypsies. The right to steal from non-gypsies is not a crime. The romantic gypsy legend says that once upon a time, all the horses were free to walk the fields and were nobody. and then some gadgets, and they were all taken away. So every gypsy has a natural right to steal from peasant horses and return them to nature's. Gypsies are so proud of their thievery and consider myself very intelligent when outwitted. So, yeah, I don't know. Where do these gypsies fit into all this? Oh, they say only a few generations in Romania gypsies and Jews, but many Jews in Romania did not like it when they hung out with a gypsy. So are they related? I would have to say somehow they likely are somehow related because the English word for gypsies is gypsy, and it is an acronym for Egyptian or Egyptian. So why would the word derive from Egyptians, right? And they travel around, they commit a lot of crimes, they don't seem to have a lot of rules compared to them. I don't know. They sound like these same people to me, but here again, the whole idea is and somebody made a pretty funny quote. They said, but anyway, so all the files for the gypsy business, you'll file under the last show. You'll find them under there. And here is the best quote that summed it up. It says, gypsies are the Jews that didn't work. So yeah, makes sense to me. But like I said, this is going to be more of a discovery show. Look for yourself. I provided you with tons and tons of articles to click away. The best place to click on articles is over on my website because a lot of these podcast places, you don't have clickable links. So you do you. If you want to look more, I certainly have given you the information. So how does all this work together? More questions than answers, right? Be safe out there. Goodbye for now.